Hey everybody, it's Velocity Pete here. Welcome back to another episode of our Velocity Sellers podcast. I'm joined by, this week again, we have two regulars, two people you've seen before, and you know that they're all smart and that we all have great beards. It's Brian and Eric. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you want to quickly introduce yourselves again for those who haven't seen the last episode we did about inventory management.
So, I mean, Pete, like you give yourself nicknames all the time. Like, do we have our own nickname? Like, what are we? Like Team Beard?
Team Beard, yeah, the three Muskabeards.
No,
Beard Central. No, that's it. That's the one.
The three Muskabeards.
There it is.
That's the one. Yep, absolutely love it. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast again. I'm Director of Brand Management here at Velocity. My name is Eric Peterson. I've been working on Amazon for about 7 years or so, and just kind of been mixing into all sorts of different accounts, have different experience levels on, different categories and all that kind of stuff, and love to share my experiences with all you.
That was really fast, Pete. I'm impressed with that nickname and how quick you came with it. And I mean, we should just get matching tattoos at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not gonna say I thought of that before. And maybe have used that elsewhere, but I haven't. So that was definitely 100% off the top of my head.
But real quick, Brian, before you introduce yourself, where are we getting tattoos? Is it like just across the upper back? Or are we doing arm tattoos, thigh tattoos?
Neck tattoos? Like
a neck, yeah.
Go all out. Yeah.
Just points to the beard, like from your neck, like an arrow pointing to it.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
I'm Brian Duffy. I'm inventory logistics here at Velocity Sellers. I've been in the Amazon arena for 4 or 5 years, but in logistics supply chain for well over 20 years. I don't want to age myself, but and I feel like I have bad news too, because I live in Louisiana, and when it gets hot here, I got to shave the beard. It's just too hot. So am I like thrown out of the group, or are you not going to ask me to do podcasts? I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but
I'm going to give you guys a little tidbit about my college days. I ran a little club in Scranton. Shout out to all my Scranton alum who watched the podcast. It was called the Bearded Men of Scranton. And we'd have a secret handshake that only the club members knew. We had a women's division, so we were very inclusive. And even if a club member shaved his beard, as the president of the club, I still welcomed him with open arms and said, just because you have the potential to grow one, is that all the membership you need to be in the club. So if you shave it, and I get it, you live in Louisiana, maybe you keep the mustache, maybe you do an early Movember, but the beard, I get it. It is, as someone who does not like the heat, I understand that completely.
I appreciate your acceptance. It means a lot.
Well, all right. I wish we could have a whole podcast on beards. That's another, that's an idea for my notebook, beard podcast. But today we're here to talk about Amazon. Dang it. We're here to talk about specifically FBA versus FBM. So if you don't know what that is, it's fulfilled by Amazon versus fulfilled by merchant. We're going to get into both of those, what they are, the benefits of each, pros and cons, basically just the whole kit and caboodle of these two fulfillment systems. So first things first is, Brian, can we get a little bit of a simple elevator pitch on both FBA and FBM? Like what are they? The bare bones basics.
Yeah, so FBM would be you have your own warehouse, you have your own fulfillment network, and even though you have your listing on Amazon and you're generating sales, it's your sales channel through Amazon. You're handling the storage, you have your warehouse that you have the inventory in, and then you're handling the pick, pack, and ship of that product. But you also are handling customer service. Now, if you have FBA, so fulfilled by Amazon, you are sending product in a replenishment order, so a bulk order into Amazon, and they are storing it in their network, their warehousing network, and then they're handling pick, pack, ship, but they are also handling the customer service side of that too. So you still are generating sales through both of them, but as far as who holds that inventory at their warehouse and who does the pick, pack, and ship is the difference.
Amen. That is the skinny. That is the 411 on FBA versus FBM. So to get a little more detailed, to get a little bit more into the weeds on this topic, 'cause that's what we're here to do. What are the simple benefits of doing FBA versus FBM for selling on Amazon?
Good question. It's a little bit loaded. But we can get like you said, we can get
Eric, I
in the weeds
love
here.
giving you these loaded questions. I love giving you these super complex questions that you cannot answer in 30 seconds.
Okay, well, the biggest problem that I have though is that I'm super verbose and I don't shut up and I can talk. I can talk all day without saying anything. But so I'm just gonna try to keep it tight a little bit. So like, the benefits, right? If you go FBA, you get the Prime badge. FBM, you don't get the Prime badge. That's one of the quick and easy ways to look at it. But to go directly into your question, it really kind of, again, it's always going to be, business to business, right? It's always going to have a little bit of nuances. Now, if like in general, most Amazon businesses are going to be kind of run the same, almost, right? You want to go FBA. Simply, you want to go FBA. It's going to give you a little bit more power with getting the buy box. You're going to get that Prime badge. And that's a big deal. Just having that Prime badge and the two day shipping, right? I mean, that's what everybody goes to Amazon for, especially too with, if you do have it ship into FBA. I have a local Amazon distribution center. I can get stuff the same day. So, your FBM probably can't get stuff to the same day. So FBA is also, one of those great benefits of just moving product a lot faster, giving that customer a little bit more of a buying incentive. If your competition takes 7 days and you have same day, you're gonna win that you're just gonna take money from your competition, which is the goal here. But really going into it a little bit more is, if you're set up and let's say you're already like you do really well on your excuse me, I keep trying to say Amazon website. I want to say your website. So if you're doing a lot of volume on your website, you might, and you just have you're staffed up for that, onesies and twosies going out all the time. Maybe you want to just kind of stick to that same format. But the biggest thing is you just want to kind of be smart about it. You want to make sure that, whether you ship FBM or FBA, you're still going to have your referral fee. Your referral fee is going to be based on your category. Most categories are going to be about 15%. So you're going to have a 15% fee right off of your price in most circumstances. There's going to be some nuances to that where, if it's like $9.99, it might be 8%. There's different percentages, right? So just make sure that you go into your, you can just go into Amazon, do the search bar, say FBA referral fees. The thing will pop up. You'll see exactly where you're sitting, based on your, just based on your price and, based on your pricing category. And then from there, you'll want to just kind of say, hey, if I'm shipping from, let's just say your warehouse is in the Midwest, you're shipping to New York, ship to Washington State, average those two out, and that's going to be your shipping cost. And then if you take your weights and dims, go on to Amazon, it'll tell you exactly what your shipping costs would be using FBA. And if it's like a 1-to-1, FBA is a better route. Even if it's like, I don't know, a couple bucks difference, I'd almost say that you're going to move volume faster, FBA. But it's going to be a decision that's going to be, based on internal conversations that you're going to have. But I recommend FBA almost 100% of the time. There's been some clients in the past that have like huge products that kind of are slow movers. You might not want to do that just for the long storage fees.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you got small products, I'd say FBA almost 100% of the time.
Brian, do you have something?
Yes. Well, and in truth, I mean, it's kind of just looking at, FBM as a strategy. So let's say I've got a new product. I'm not really sure how it's going to do on Amazon. Instead of just guessing at your initial order and then getting stuck with inventory or feeling like you have to run a sale or something like that, instead you can switch it to FBM and then kind of see how it does. And then from there you can go, okay, yeah, now I want to move FBA because I see it's going to be, an opportunity. And so, I mean, there's benefits in both. And like Eric said, I would always go FBA. If it's going to be a seller, then absolutely. It's easier to manage I'm going to do a bulk order and ship that in as a replenishment, and then allow FBA to handle the onesie twosie orders. And it's kind of from a standpoint, if you're a small business, you may not have the infrastructure. So that's a big deal as far as, because you may be using a 3PL, and 3PL is going to charge you more to send those single, double orders ever so often than versus Amazon, because they're pick, pack, and ship. I know we have complaints about it, but it's still a pretty good bargain if you really started to crunch the numbers. And yes, bulk items definitely are something that you want to. And I think a caveat too is apparel, is that we work with people who sell apparel, and if you have a shirt, your medium, large, and extra large sell significantly more than your small and double XL, but you want to have the gamut when someone goes on there, because maybe they want to order some for the family. So having a strategy about what's FBM and what's FBA is definitely a way to go about it. But in the end, it's all about profitability, and that you've got to understand as a business, and having worked with small businesses, we've had to understand that too, is what makes sense as far as FBM and FBA, and looking at that and making sure that you're making wise choices when it comes to what the business is. Hopefully, I mean, it's not the single source maybe, but at least it's about profitability in what you have and what you're selling.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know that a lot of that, Eric, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what Brian said. So like, Brian, you said at the very beginning, like if you have a new product and you're just kind of not sure about like how much velocity is going to have there, and you're just like, I'm going to just go FBM. Well, we do have this shameless plug. We do have a Vine video podcast, right? We talked about Vine already, but you could send 30 units FBA just to enroll it in Vine, get those reviews, and then you can go right back to FBM. So you can kind of use FBA just to kind of get that momentum built up, or just kind of get that listing a little bit more retail ready. When you have 0 to 5 reviews, your velocity is going to be real low unless you're Apple or Nike or somebody, like a well-known brand, right? So when you first start out, highly recommend doing an FBA, do some Vine, get that rolling, pull back to FBM, and see, if that product is desirable as your research showcases. And if it starts to move a lot more and your warehouse is starting to get a little bit, can't keep up, then switch over to FBA. Or like Brian said, which is absolutely amazing, just to be aware of, as well as like how many times do you have to pay your 3PL? I know some 3PLs you pay them like every time they touch a product. It's really going to depend on your 3PL and how much volume you move. But just kind of keep that in mind too. When going back to saying, hey, like do a cost analysis on that stuff. Make sure that you kind of understand the 3PL's process and what they're charging you per unit, and build that in.
Yeah, my next question was actually going to be that cost analysis, is looking at both of them and kind of seeing what's involved in both. I know we talked a lot about already, like no matter what one you sell on, Amazon's taking that 15 to or 8 to like 15%, whatever it is, referral fee, depending on the category. And then you've also got your FBA costs involved, and I know that, and then you've got your advertising costs. So a third of your sales are paying Amazon, which might seem like a lot, but Jeff's got to keep his yacht afloat somehow, so I totally get that. But it is going to be a lot. It is going to be a bit taxing on some sellers. But that's not to say that there's no cost involved in FBM. You do, like Eric said, you got to pay your 3PLs. You got to pay to package. You got to pay someone to ship it out. If you don't pay Amazon, so there's costs on both sides. I feel like I talked to some sellers or some of the people that come into the sales channel, and they're like, oh, like I don't want to pay Amazon all that money. I'm like, well, you're just paying someone else that money anyway. Like, it's not like you're getting shipping for free if you don't do FBA. And it just seems like all the benefits of FBA, like getting you that Prime badge, getting you that you can do same day shipping with Amazon today. It just seems like there's a whole slew of benefits to be using FBA. Of course, again, unless the cost analysis comes back and all of a sudden FBM is like more profitable just because Amazon's charging you $1 million because your product's giant. And is just like a box of rocks that you're shipping out that weighs a bunch of pounds. So a lot of things to consider. Again, doing that cost analysis is definitely going to be crucial to seeing which one's right for you. And if you ever want someone else to do that cost analysis, our team can do that for you with our enhanced logistics services by Velocity Sellers.
Good call out there, Pete. So cost analysis, right? You're going to take your price, you're going to take your COGS, get as detailed as possible with your COGS, whether it's, buying it from China, manufacturing in China, whatever you're doing, just get as detailed as you can with your COGS. And so include that in one of your columns. You're going to do maybe your cost, maybe even break it out, your shipping cost. And then if you have a 3PL, put all that in there. And then also your like shipping time, right? Because there's going to be a difference between them packing and shipping it from your 3PL. Whereas when they just pack it on a pallet or pack it into a parcel and then send it into FBA, those are probably going to be a little bit of two different costs, maybe depending on your 3PL. And Brian can probably speak to that a little bit, but real quick, I'll kind of finish this up and then Brian, you can jump in about some 3PL stuff. A good thing is like put your FBA fee. That'll be your shipment, like your shipping fee from your 3PL. Okay. That's that 1-to-1 ratio. Your referral fee is going to be the same no matter what. And then what I wanted to just kind of double down on with what you said, Pete, advertising cost. That's a great call out because people kind of forget that. If you want to be aggressive, go about 15%. If you want to go like kind of a slow, kind of healthy growth, go 10%.
Percent of what? 10% of what?
Of the price, right? It's going to just be that's just what you're going to be inputting into every time you make a sale, it'll be 10% tacos, right? So if you break it down by a SKU level, it's just 10% of your sale, which is your price point, right? So 10%. And then also you can't just get by without. I mean, you can. This is also loaded, I guess. If you're, depending on what you're doing and your strategy, your marketing strategy is like, if you premium, blah, 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 whatever. If you decide that you're like never going to go on sale, then ignore what I'm about to say. But most companies are going to have promotions, whether it's going to be fourth quarter, holiday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all of these different events, Prime Day in July. I think there's a sale coming up here in March. Try to think in your mind, like, what can I do? What's like a normal thing? So if it's like 20%, 25%, you can kind of see that in your cost analysis, because at any moment at any time, if you start selling a bunch of units on a promotion, you're going to all of a sudden you might be in the red. So I would always add like a promotional percentage. And then when you see your profit, you might have to adjust your price, because some people forget about the promotion side of things, like the advertising and then actually having a 20% discount, and be surprised. I just did a cost analysis for a client and they're making about 16 cents. So like that doesn't feel great, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to make that 16 cents, right? You're dealing with Chinese factories, you're dealing with whoever's manufacturing. There's a lot of work on your end that you're probably not actually seeing. Maybe some emails back and forth. That 16 cents goes pretty fast. So always add some of those promotional things. But I kept talking a little bit, but I wanted to throw it back to Brian, just maybe he can give us a little bit more insight on 3PL charging.
Yeah, and most 3PLs they're going to charge you every time they touch the product. Now, you can do, some will have, if they have portals that you use when you select a bulk order, there's just less of a charge because they're doing pallets at a time, master cartons at a time. So it's easier for them, because otherwise they're pulling individual units and it's just more time consuming for them to do that. So it's always going to be cheaper to send in bulk versus individual units. But probably a factor that customers should understand too is that customer experience. If they think they can provide a better customer experience than Amazon, then FBM is the case. I mean, that's kind of, you'd have to have some dedicated people in order to pull that off, as far as being able to answer the questions. If it's just one person running a small business, you can easily get behind on that. But then with FBA, you just have a little bit more support as far as that customer service, and it's kind of in how you want to handle it and that kind of things. And you can set parameters as far as if you have it FBA, but if you're FBM, then that's all on you. And if you want to send another one, now you've duplicated that cost and you've kind of done that. But it's as far as it being FBA, it's just probably better customer experience than what you can offer. Plus, I think people just feel more comfortable with that. And to be honest, me as a consumer with Amazon too, is I wanted to have that badge. I of course look for where warehouse it's coming from, because it'll say an Amazon warehouse. I feel like I can trust that more, and it's always quicker shipping, because that's where you get, sometimes you go on there and it's like 2 weeks delivery and you're like, man, where are they delivering from? It's because they've just built them a margin to go, well, I need some time to realize I got an order. Well, I need some time to pick and pack and ship that order and purchase labels plus the carrier's time that it takes to deliver. So they just given themselves a giant lead time to complete that. And you probably will get it sooner, sometimes later. I mean, maybe they didn't process orders as often as they should in order to meet those expectations. And then of course you get dinged from Amazon if you are outside that window as far as delivery. But it just puts more on you to make sure you manage those. And if you're missing orders and all of a sudden your metric is hitting bad because you've got some orders, or maybe you've had to cancel orders because you thought you had inventory but you don't have inventory and you can't send what you don't have, that happens more often than I would think would happen. And you kind of just get stuck with the repercussions of that as far as your metric looking bad. And that's just an area that's tough as customer service, is you don't want to mess with that too much, because you start giving people a bad experience, then they're not going to be return customers, or they leave bad reviews, and now you're digging yourself out of a hole. So yeah, definitely 3PLs are a major factor in your cost analysis, because you really need to understand the detail of that cost. But then customer experience is kind of that, you may not know the cost of it, but it's definitely going to impact your sales and profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I was hoping to convey to our viewers today, is that there's a lot that goes into this. This is not just a simple like, I'm gonna flip a coin. I'm gonna let my dog. I'm gonna put out 2 treats and see which one my dog chooses, and I'll go with that.
I have and of course I have something else to say to Brian's big brain. So recently I had a client that had a similar issue, right? Brian, you said like if you do cancellations, right? I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Like if question to Brian, but then also I want to just kind of reiterate the issue here is, Brian, how would you recommend that sellers manage their channels? Because if they're manually updating inventory on Amazon and manually updating their inventory on, let's say, Shopify or WooCommerce or whatever the website is, or maybe they're all over the place in different channels, that's a big deal for FBM, managing that inventory. I'll let Brian kind of talk about that here in 1 second. But like, I ran into a situation where our client had to keep canceling orders. And what ended up happening is that Amazon decided that you can't be trusted with shipping the product to the customer or giving them a good offer, or giving them a good customer experience.
Wow.
So they removed the buy box, and they were not buy box eligible. Like, it just removes their buy box. So like, they don't even have to have another seller on the list or on their ASIN. They just get their buy box removed because they're just not trusted to give that customer a good experience. So it usually lasts about 7 days ish, because that you have that pre-cancellation percentage. I believe off the top of my head, I think it's like you have to be under 2.5%. If you don't have enough volume, 1 or 2 cancellations could just blow you out to like 4%, 5%. And so I guess I just want everybody to kind of be aware of that. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I just want to let everybody be aware of that. But then I want to pass it over to Brian, because I'm sure Brian's got some really good ideas on how to, control your inventory across channels.
And that's a big problem, is if you are supply chain and you are looking at really managing your inventory across your multiple sales channels, because unless you're using a bigger type of system to handle your inventory management, and you've kind of got a problem of what is your single source of where you're containing your inventory, that's the absolute correct, accurate, because you've got Amazon If you're doing FBM, FBA, however you're handling that, you've got Amazoning that's deducting inventory. You have your own website sales that are deducting inventory. If you do any kind of wholesale ordering, it's deducting inventory. And if the problem at hand is that it can be a big investment that you can do as far as getting you some type of system to be a source for that. Of course, the bigger companies are using MRP systems that allow you to manage that at a software standpoint. So every time an order is created, anytime there's an inventory adjustment, they're going into the system to make that addition, subtraction, whatever is happening, a sale has happened. Most people aren't like that. Most small, medium size, you're doing that on your own, and you can use Shopify to manage your inventory. I've done that in the past, but you go in there to manually, because of course that'll handle your website sales. You can have it connected to Amazon. So then those types of sales are happening. Now, if it's FBA, that's already being handled on its own. Now, if you do a replenishment, you've got to say, okay, I've taken this bulk order and I have to remove it from mine. But at least with FBA, that's being tracked. You know your trigger, you can handle reporting to update that. But then on your side, you've got a warehouse that's got inventory, and we've got the gamut as far as clients. I feel like some people are a pad of paper and a pen, and others are spreadsheets. Most of them are spreadsheets, and some are getting a little bit more intelligent in how they manage it. But that's a big, I believe, pain point for clients in general is inventory integrity. And we've got some clients who do a once a year cycle, or not, it's a physical count. And that's tough. Like, you're going to have some major margins of errors. Now, typically in inventory management, you want to cycle count your inventory on a regular basis, weekly, monthly, depending on that. And it's random samplings, and I can get all nerdy on the statistics and how you can manage that. But that's a really big piece to understand your management, because once you're canceling orders and you're starting to hit that metric, and especially them losing their buy box, that's hard to dig out of that hole for sure.
Yeah. And Brian, real quick, no matter what size the seller, maybe 1 SKU to 50,000 SKUs, let's say, or whatever, right? What do you recommend? Like, what is your basic, would you recommend like Skubana, or would you recommend like, some sort of inventory software where they can say, use an API to Amazon and all their channels, or like, what is your best advice, without getting too nerdy, like you said, with some statistics and stuff? Like, what do you recommend?
I mean, now you can, and of course, you want a sync with Amazon so that you can understand it, especially for FBM orders, what's happening. But you can manage things as simple as, Shopify, WooCommerce. You can handle, you have warehouses that you can set in place on those avenues, and you can manage them. Now, there's, of course, if you're just, wanting something even, of course, spreadsheets are kind of the common thing around here, but definitely some add-ons, web-based add-ons that allow you to manage it. To have something is, of course, the most important, but it depends on your velocity, how quickly you sell things, how often you're shipping items, that kind of determine the next steps. But it's like the first step is just doing, it's like, for finances, the first big thing for you to do is have a budget. You got to start somewhere and then scale up from there. But you can keep it. I've managed inventory for a small business, and we just had the Shopify warehouse that we use, and it's just that feature that's on there. But then, of course, you had interfaces with Amazon that allowed you to degrade inventory accordingly, and things like that, so that it's more automatic. Because of course, then the more manual you get, the more mistakes will happen. And all of a sudden, what you thought was 25, which is getting a little low, is now 5 and now 0, just because you've had inventories flow. Right?
To get a little bit back to the topic at hand, looking at after you figured out all of that complicated logistics talk, when you decide, like, all right, I'm going to do FBA. Let's talk about FBA first. I'm going to do FBA. What is involved with getting in that FBA shipment? What does a seller have to do? What has to be on the products? What has to, like, labeling wise? and just really just sending in a shipment. What does a seller have to do to go about that?
So sending FBA, it's how we talked before. It's about that bulk in inventory that you're sending in, and send Amazon is kind of it's a workflow that they really improved over the years. It used to be a lot messier and manually entering in and things like that. But now if you go in and you have a SKU that you want to send in, you can set a template in there that says this shipping carton is these dimensions, this weight, and I want to send in 20 of them. And then that's done. You're just typing in the number 20 and saying, confirming that that's what you want to send. And then from there, you step down the steps and the workflow just makes it very easy as far as what needs to happen. Now, do you need to label those products? Do you have a UPC? Do you have a manufacturing barcode that is already on your product? Then you can just use that and you set your product up for that. Or Amazon offers the Fulfillment Network SKU that you can use, and that's just strictly for Amazon that you can apply to it. And that's where, if you're looking at, you have other third-party sellers that are sending in, you can commingle it if you're using manufacturing barcodes because they're using the same barcodes you are. But if you're using that Fulfillment Network barcode, then it is specific to you as the seller. It's specific to your product. So it's a lot easier for yours to not get commingled with other products. So that's definitely an option. But if you already have retail packaging, you already have a barcode, then you don't want to put on extra barcodes because it's extra work. Amazon, of course, charges you money to label your product if you so choose.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you're determining is how you want to send it. If it's cost effective for you to send it UPS or LTL, less than truckload, then you're sending in a pallet at a time. And it just depends on you as what your expectations are of how much you need to send in. Of course, sending a pallet is going to be cheaper, but UPS, if you're using Amazon preferred carrier, it's going to be faster to get received in. And then you're kind of confirming you're getting shipping labels and everything you need to send that in. And from the LTL side, Amazon does an amazing, for me, inventory management is a help that they will connect you to a carrier. The rates are extremely competitive, but then you can go there to say, when it's going to be ready for pickup. And then they automatically send you an email with the bill of lading that, I used to have to manually fill those out at a time. And then they are scheduling the pickup. So they're providing you the paperwork, but then the day before, they'll send you a confirmation of, hey, this is your 2-hour window. That didn't used to always happen either. And so they start to provide you a window of when that'll be picked up too. And so it's really nice the way they set things up. But at the same time, you want to make sure you understand requirements for carton sizes and all those little details that you need to do, or else you can have some problems definitely at the receiving process. And we've encountered many of those in our time. But you just want to make sure what I would say is the routing guide for Amazon, because they do have specifics on how they want things to arrive at their facility to, of course, speed up their receiving process, because money is time for them too, as they want everything the right way so they can receive it as quick as possible.
Yeah. Eric, we looked at the buy box kind of for each, looking at, again, measuring out your costs and all that kind of good stuff. How does each fulfillment method affect the buy box?
So FBA will trump FBM if they're at the same price. And then there's Seller Fulfilled Prime. I have seen Seller Fulfilled Prime, even though you have a 2-day shipping with the Seller Fulfilled Prime and it seems to equal FBA, I have not seen ever an SFP, which is Seller Fulfilled Prime. I've never seen that offer beat an FBA if they're at the same price. So Amazon is always going to outweigh FBA versus FBM or Seller Fulfilled Prime. So If you are in a competitive niche, if you are a 3P and you're selling, and maybe you on an ASIN that's shared by several other people, maybe 10 people, and you're all buying the same product from some other brand, you will want to be FBA. That'll give you the best opportunity. If everybody's FBM, you can weigh that decision to stay FBM. You'll get your turn, but if you go FBA, you should beat everybody out. I think I'm making sense, Pete. Am I making sense here? I feel like I'm not making sense. Okay.
I'm getting it.
I made it more complicated than it needed to be.
The simple answer is that FBA people are always going to win the buy box over FBM
if the prices are the same. I have seen FBM beat out FBA if the price is low enough. I've seen FBM beat out vendor, like from a vendor, if that FBM price is lower than the vendor cost, which is what vendor is buying the product from. So if vendor is buying the product from the whatever brand for $20, FBM comes in at 19. Vendor's not stupid. They'll be like, "It's yours, man. You have it. You take the loss." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it gets a little complicated.
So that's something else you got to factor into that cost analysis. Is kind of like, what's your price point? And obviously that's something you factor in right away to see how much you're making. But another side of that price point is, are you going to win the buy box most of the time? What's out there already? What's already winning the buy box? Can you compete with not only ship time now, but also looking at price and seeing, again, just where you land?
The other thing I should mention too, so like if you're a business and you are doing a lot of wholesale, just selling to different partners and stuff like that, and if you don't have really good contracts, and I think maybe we've talked about this in the past, but if you don't have good contracts, Amazon says that you are to have the lowest price on the internet. And so if you sell it to somebody that goes and posts it on Walmart or Home Depot or something, you could lose the buy box. So if they lower their price below let's say you're $19.99 on Amazon and they lower the price to $16.99 on Walmart, you'll lose the buy box. Now, the reason why I bring this up is if you go FBA and that's going to happen, you could incur long-term storage fees because your velocity is not going to be there. So that is another decision to kind of weigh in when deciding to go FBA or FBM. So if you know that you got some issues with your partners and they're not going to follow your map or your agreement, I would stick with FBM, and then hopefully you just churn enough product at some point, or when they maybe run out of inventory, then your price comes back up. You can make some quick sales, but at least like you said, Pete, you're not incurring more cost to that item.
Absolutely. And the other factor of this, we kind of talked about already, I kind of glossed over it, but talking about seller fulfilled Prime. I know this is an interesting topic, but if you what is it? What are we talking about there, that for people that haven't heard of that, people that maybe heard of that last week, not me for sure.
And it's really kind of you going after, you're getting that badge, you're getting the Prime badge, but you're fulfilling it from your own warehouse. Now, there's certain criteria for you to hold on to that badge to be Prime. And I think you got to do 100 more packages in your trial and making sure that you're meeting on-time delivery of 93.5% is what I remember frequent. And so you've got to make sure, of course, tracking is important too. You always got to provide tracking for that package so that it can be, of course, everyone wants to see tracking if they're expecting a package too. And then a big piece is what we were talking about before is cancellations, that you can't really have any cancellations if you want to keep that badge. So you got to make sure that you're below 1% as far as those cancellation goes. And then, from there, it's just maintaining those numbers. If you start to dip below, you're getting at rates. So the more you ship, the more margin for error is, but you just got to be able to keep up those numbers and those metrics.
It just seems like, why would you even want to incur the stress of having to basically match Amazon's service with your own shipping when, as we know in the last episode from our cleverly thought up worded title, Amazon is the biggest shipping dynasty in the world. what benefit is there to compete with them on this level? Unless you're like, again, maybe this is only for people like Apple and Microsoft, maybe, but what benefit is there?
I can take this. So like if you have, let's say you have 10,000 SKUs and you don't have high volume SKUs. Maybe you only have, maybe you only sell 1-2 units a day or something, right? So if you were to like ship in too many, like it goes back to like shipping cost or like the long-term storage cost of FBA. So maybe you don't want to do that, or maybe you have too many items that you're going to send in FBA, and you just don't have the cubic feet. You don't have the storage to do it. So there's different reasons. But what I've seen though, like the biggest thing is like you have to be open and shipping on Saturday. Like that's one of the biggest problems. And if people don't order, let's say you only get like, whatever your shipping cutoff is, and like you have to pay your staff to come in on Saturday, and they might only have like 2 hours worth of work. So you're paying somebody to, maybe it takes 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes for them to drive into work. They get paid for 2 hours. They go home. It's hard on your employees. It's hard just to fulfill those benefits. And the other thing too is I've heard that it's difficult. Like if you only have if you're short staffed, you're in trouble. If somebody quits, you're in trouble because you have to hit those metrics every single day. So if every day there's 50 units need to go out and you only have one warehouse employee doing it, they get the flu, they had some bad sushi the night before or whatever, they call in sick. You're in there, now you have to go into the warehouse and pick, pack, and ship those things, because if you miss that, like Brian said, if you miss, 7%, if you go to 93% or whatever, it's very difficult. You could mess this up in one day. If you miss all the orders, you could be disqualified for Seller Fulfill Prime. But going back to like the benefit of it is that you are able to pick, pack, and ship from your warehouse with the Prime badge. But at what cost? Like it could be it's just a lot of stress. It's just having deadlines all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's again, like it just seems like this is just such like it's a cool flex that you're like, oh yeah, I fill my products just as well as Amazon does with my own, shipping system. But behind the scenes, it's like you're just you're fighting demons left and right, dog. It just does not seem like something that I personally, again, I don't think it just seems like it's worth it. It's like, do we see a lot of success with this kind of stuff?
No.
Simple answer. I like it.
Yeah. Anybody that comes, they're usually done with it real fast. Anybody that tries to do it, they're done fast. I mean, it's just, again, you go, like the biggest thing is like just forcing your employees to work 6 days a week. And like they oftentimes won't even get a full day on Saturday. I mean, it's just hard. It's just very difficult for everybody.
And sometimes they'll forget to update holiday schedules. So they're like closed one day.
Oh, yeah.
And then they didn't recognize that. And now they're just out of luck. That's happened before too. It's tough.
Yeah, I've seen that, like where like holiday break, Monday they have a day off or whatever, so the boss is being nice and gives everybody Friday off, but then forgets, and then boom, Seller Fulfill Prime revoked.
Yeah, and that's like
tough.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I just don't really see the super worth it benefit of it. So, but like I said, if it works for people, it works for people. Works for you, But if it's just something that you got to be. I think it's super niche, right? Like I would say it's like like if they have a slow moving product, and maybe, but most of the time, like just use FBA. just give it to Amazon. Let them figure it out. Just keep Jeff's yachts afloat. Like it's whatever. Like, well, gentlemen, this was a phenomenal episode. A little bit in there that I didn't even expect. That was not on our agenda. So hats off to the both of you for even surprising the Velocity Pete, the podcast host, with some great topics to bring and to share with our viewers. Any final thoughts on sort of looking at FBA versus FBM for our viewers?
So, I mean, it's really, in the end, it's about profitability. And like Eric said, it's about as detailed a cost analysis as you can put together is what you want to do, getting your COGS as much as you can plug in there as possible, each unit, cost, and things like that, to understand what's beneficial for you, not. And of course, velocity and size of it is big too. If your product is too big, you don't want to pay a bunch of money to send it FBA just to pay a bunch of money for it to go to each customer too. So it's always just make sure you're educated, and you got to work with velocity sellers so we can provide you all the information that you need in order to make that decision, and make sure all the factors are being understood.
Amen. See, I didn't have to see Jake. I didn't even have to do it. It's the guests are plugging velocity. It's not even me, so you can't get mad at them or me. So
my final thought is like, back, Brian, it all comes down to profitability, but FBA is going to be most of the time your winner. It's going to be cheaper shipping. Like Brian already kind of mentioned, it's going to be very competitive. And what that typically means is you're not going to beat FBA's shipping fees. They're just better, typically, unless you have a really, 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 really good contract with a shipper, right? So FBA is going to really be the way to go. It removes a lot of headaches. It really does. Like Brian mentioned, the returns, it's easier. The Amazon's going to do it. Customer side of things is going to be better. You don't have to worry about giving them shipping labels for returns and things like that. You won't have to worry about pre-cancellation rates, all of those things that can really impact your account. FBA, you don't have to worry about, Prime badge, why, this or that. Like your listing is going to be most of the time up unless like you have some of these pricing issues or some other stuff. But, it's just better. Amazon's going to pitch Amazon, right? So they're going to favor their own program. So FBA is the route to go. But I'm not saying if you can't do it, I'm not saying that you're going to just completely lose. I'm just saying if you comparing them together, FBA is going to be an easier path to success. Not saying FBM can't be successful. It's just kind of two different models. But if you have smaller products, FBA is the way, especially if you even go with the small and light program, which we kind of didn't talk about. That gives you a little bit of a discount.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming back on the podcast. It sounds like we have a few more episodes with the three Muskabeards coming up soon, because that was a lot of information that I want to get more into the weeds about. So you will be getting a message from me soon about, hey, we need to record another podcast. One thing I do want to throw in here right at the end, if you haven't heard of them yet, or if you haven't seen them, there are a lot of new fees coming this year for affecting every single seller. It's not, anything specific to any kind of categories. Well, there are some category-specific ones, but for the most part, there's a lot of updated fees coming in 2024, mostly around the end of March, beginning of April. If you haven't seen it, we've put out a video about it explaining all of them and really what you can expect to see. It's linked in the description down below. It shows, check it out, again, to really factor that in when you're looking at, again, FBA versus FBM. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Velocity Pete, and we will see you next week.